It began, as these stories often do, with a simple key and a door. Not just any door, but the one marked with 3 tarnished brass numbers. 313. Room 313. The Grand Majestic Hotel had stood for over a century, a silent witness to the city's changing face. Its marble floors had been polished by the footsteps of presidents and paupers, its chandeliers casting a golden glow on fleeting moments of joy and quiet desperation.
Ho, ho, ho!
But some rooms, some corners of this grand old dame, held secrets darker than the unlit corridors of its service levels. I arrived on a Tuesday, the sky a bruised canvas of purple and gray. A storm was brewing, a restless energy that seemed to seep through the very mortar of the building. The concierge, a man whose face was a road map of polite indifference, slid the key across the polished mahogany counter. Room 313, sir. Top floor, end of the east wing. Enjoy your stay. There was no smile, no warmth.
Ho, ho, ho!
Just the mechanical delivery of a well-rehearsed line. The key felt unnaturally cold in my palm, a small, jagged piece of metal that seemed to hum with a strange, low frequency. The elevator ride was a slow, creaking ascent, each floor announced by a soft, weary chime. The east wing was quiet. Too quiet. My footsteps were swallowed by the thick crimson carpet, the air growing heavier, colder with each step I took toward the end of the hall.
Ho, ho, ho!
The portraits of stern-faced founders lining the walls seemed to watch me, their painted eyes following my progress with unnerving focus. And there it was, room 313. The door was darker than the others, its varnish aged to a near black, the brass numbers gleaming faintly in the dim hallway light. A slow, rhythmic ticking sound seemed to emanate from within, a sound that felt both ancient and immediate. With a deep breath, I inserted the key. The lock turned with a grating click that echoed in the silence.
Ho, ho, ho!
The door swung inward on its own, not with a sudden jolt, but with a slow, deliberate grace, as if inviting me into a long-prepared space. The air that flowed out was stale, carrying the faint, cloying scent of dried roses and something else, something metallic and vaguely unsettling, like old pennies. The room was frozen in time. A heavy, velvet curtain, the color of dried blood, was drawn across the window, blocking out what little light the stormy afternoon offered.
Ho, ho, ho!
A 4-poster bed dominated the space, its canopy casting deep shadows on the neatly made covers. A grandfather clock stood silent in the corner, its pendulum still, yet the ticking I'd heard from the hall persisted, a phantom heartbeat with no discernible source. On a small writing desk by the window, a leather-bound journal lay open, a fountain pen resting beside it as if its owner had just stepped away for a moment. Curiosity, a dangerous and often foolish impulse, drew me to the desk.
Ho, ho, ho!
The ticking grew louder here, seeming to vibrate up from the wooden floorboards. The journal's pages were filled with elegant, looping script. The ink was faded, the entries dated decades ago. I leaned closer, my breath catching in my throat as I read the first line. October 12, 1928. I have been a guest of this room for 3 nights now. But I fear I am not its only occupant. I spent the next hour engrossed in the diary of a man named Alistair Finch.
Ho, ho, ho!
He was a traveling salesman, a purveyor of fine silks, who found himself stranded at the Majestic during a blizzard. His initial entries were mundane, detailing sales and travel plans. But his tone quickly shifted. He wrote of whispers in the dead of night, formless shadows that danced at the edge of his vision, and a constant, unshakable feeling of being watched. He described the ticking clock, the same one that now stood silent, as a merciless metronome counting down to an unknown event.
Ho, ho, ho!
The sound is in my bones, he wrote. It is the sound of time unraveling. A low hum started to fill the room, a subtle vibration that resonated deep in my chest. It harmonized with the incessant ticking, creating a disorienting, hypnotic drone. I looked up from the journal, my eyes scanning the shadowed corners of the room. A flicker of movement. By the wardrobe. I blinked, convinced it was a trick of the light, a product of my overactive imagination fueled by Alistair's frantic words.
Ho, ho, ho!
But then it happened again. A sliver of deeper blackness detached itself from the shadows, a shape that was tall and impossibly thin, before melting back into the gloom. My heart hammered against my ribs. I flipped further into the journal, my fingers trembling slightly. Alistair's entries became more erratic, his beautiful script evolving into a desperate scrawl. He wrote of a woman in a white dress who would appear by the window when the storm was at its worst.
Ho, ho, ho!
He never saw her face, only her silhouette against the violent flashes of lightning. He believed she was a former guest, a bride left at the altar, who had chosen this very room to end her sorrow. He wrote that she wasn't lonely, and she didn't want him to be either. She whispers my name, the last coherent entry read. She says there is peace in the stillness. She says there is no need to ever check out. The final pages were filled with meaningless scratches and ink blots, the desperate marks of a mind coming undone.
Ho, ho, ho!
The last thing written, barely legible, was a single phrase, "She is in the mirror." Instinctively, my head snapped toward the ornate, full-length mirror attached to the wardrobe door. The hum in the room intensified, the ticking now a frantic, deafening pulse. My own reflection stared back at me, pale and wide-eyed. But behind me, in the mirrored depiction of the room, something was wrong. The velvet curtain was not drawn. In the reflection, it was pulled aside, revealing a night sky racked with lightning.
Ho, ho, ho!
And standing there, silhouetted against the impossible, spectral storm, was the figure of a woman in a long white dress. I was frozen, my blood turning to ice. I could not see her face in the reflection, only the outline of her form. But I could feel her gaze. I could feel it boring into the back of my head, a cold, heavy pressure. Slowly, so slowly, the head of the reflected figure began to turn, not toward the window in the mirror, but toward me, toward my reflection.
Ho, ho, ho!
The low hum crescendoed into a soft, sorrowful moan that seemed to come from all around me, and from within the mirror itself. I tore my eyes away, stumbling backward, my chair crashing to the floor. I didn't dare look back. I scrambled for the door, my hand fumbling for the cold brass knob. The ticking stopped. Absolute silence descended upon the room, a silence more terrifying than the noise it replaced.
Ho, ho, ho!
I pulled the door open and threw myself into the hallway, slamming it shut behind me. I didn't wait for the elevator, I ran. Down the long crimson corridor, the silent, painted eyes of the hotel's founders judging my panicked flight. I didn't stop until I burst through the lobby doors and into the rain-swept street, the cool night air a shocking, welcome slap to my senses. I never went back for my luggage. I never looked back at the Grand Majestic Hotel.
Ho, ho, ho!
Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and a storm is on the horizon, I think I can hear it. A faint, rhythmic ticking. And I remember the elegant script in that leather-bound journal. I remember the final, terrifying words, "She's in the mirror." And I find myself unable to look at my own reflection for very long, terrified of the silent, waiting figure I might one day see standing just behind me.
Ho, ho, ho!
Room 313 doesn't just hold secrets, it keeps them. It keeps you. and part of me knows with a chilling certainty that I never truly checked out. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Dark Whispers. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Until next time, be careful what doors you open. You may not be the only one on the other side.
Ho, ho, ho!